The video I'm about to show you is from Glasgow in the last week. What do you make of this? What do I make of it? Well, that seems to be a military, paramilitary sort of aesthetic, doesn't it? 100 virtual men dressed in black, standing in a sort of military formation. Then they lay the wreath, apologising somehow to James Lumsden, who was a great Glaswegian leader in the 19th century. And then the understanding is that we've somehow ruined Glasgow through immigration, so they're apologising to our forefathers. But then also there was the little board saying the ends justify the means. Now that's a pretty dangerous moral principle, because it sounds like it's okay to do bad things if your aim is good. Well, okay, that's just, according to Christian teaching, that's not right. Let us do evil that good may result. No. The Bible certainly is totally against that. I mean, in Catholic teaching, the doctrine of double effect says you can't do bad things for good reasons. But it seems that this group is trying to lay the groundwork to say we are going to do bad things. Doing bad things is necessary in order to achieve our ends. So that's quite concerning. So to summarise the message, immigration has damaged Glasgow. We're willing to do bad things to put it right. And we're now standing in what appears to be a sort of paramilitary formation. Right, I find that combination of facts concerning. Now, Craig Houston, Restore Britain's representative spokesman, I'm not quite sure what his official title is. I mean, he was at this film and he said, wasn't it wonderful that it was Rangers fans and Celtic fans? Well, not particularly, and not really see how that makes it any less concerning. Craig Houston said, it's not just the Union Bears, which is the Rangers football ultra group. So Craig Houston said it wasn't them, which means probably it mainly was. I don't know. So looking at the statements and the symbolism, I mean, it's hardly likely to be any sort of profound, deep philosophy. So I'm not going to overanalyze it. But I think from this, you could infer a threat of violence towards immigrants or things relating to immigration. But again, the title, Glasgow rising up, fighting back, that seems to be the type of idea being put forward. So I'd say this event is irresponsible, inflammatory, would cause fear towards immigrants, Muslims, maybe. And I would say this sort of formation, this sort of gathering is a step towards violence. And Restore Britain, cheering it on all the way. Right, moving to Edinburgh this week, there was an attack in Edinburgh. I'm sure you know, 5 people were injured. I don't think any of them particularly seriously. It started at Broom House Mosque, a couple of petrol stations all the way into the centre of Edinburgh, and then ended up with the man marauding on Leith Walk with 2 big knives. Now, this has been reported as an anti-Muslim crime because the recording of him and reports of people who were there who heard him, it was making quite clearly anti-Muslim sentiments, seem to be based on the grooming gang idea. Muslims have been raping and abusing our girls. I've had enough, so I'm going to go around stabbing sort of random Muslims.
Focus, protecting the country from these fucking little bastards, raping our young daughters, raping our kids. Enough is enough. I have had enough.
Now, in response to that, what's been happening? So again, if you look at Craig Houston from Restore Britain, he's sort of suggested that it sort of didn't really happen, or we're being misled by this one way or another. So there have been some various AI images floating around, AI enhanced or AI generated images of the attacker, and some of them are different because they're AI generated. But Craig Houston's taken this as evidence that maybe the thing didn't happen. Maybe it's all a forgery. I mean, dear oh dear. The timeline published when the attacks happened in different parts of Edinburgh. I mean, one of the times between 2 of the places, it did seem quite tight. I think that the man had a car. But Craig Houston was saying, oh, this is suspicious. You couldn't really get there in that time. Maybe the whole thing's made up. He doesn't quite say it in as many words. He always pulls back at the last minute and leaves his viewers to come to the blindingly obvious conclusion that he's trying to lead them to. But then his viewers think that they've sort of intelligently deduced the right answer from the clues that he's given to them. Some other people online are saying that the audio, where the man quite plainly states that it's a sort of anti-Muslim attack, they're saying that was dubbed on later. It wasn't really real. I think that there is a substantial proportion of the population who thrive on this sort of conspiracy theorizing. It's just the norm for them. Whatever event comes along, this is the type of thinking that comes in. So that's come in already, but note which side it comes from. It comes from the anti-immigration side. You've got the anti-immigration side, representatives of it, even refusing to accept the possibility that there might have been a sort of anti-Muslim attacker marauding around Edinburgh when there plainly was. Now, what else are people saying in response? Obviously, lots of people condemned it, quite rightly, as I do. You may say, why didn't the family party put something on social media? We don't comment on everything that happens. We're not sure it's very helpful to anyone. It's just obvious, isn't it? We would condemn anything like this. But then people have also commented about the two-tier policing in response to the fact that this man is arrested. They immediately announce that he's a white man. It's immediately classed as anti-Muslim, potentially as terrorism. Whereas people suggest in other cases they're reluctant to mention the race. They're more likely to say, oh, it's a mental health problem. Okay. Now, to be honest, I think there's something in all those points. There is some truth in all of those concerns. They're very valid. I think the police are so stuck full of equality and diversity training that they find it virtually impossible to deal with things even-handedly. On the other hand, from the police's point of view, if they know that revealing the facts about a crime might lead to disorder, you can understand they might be a bit reluctant, but basically it just makes it worse. They should just release full details as soon as they can. This attacker in Edinburgh, would I say it was mental health? To be honest, yes. Does a perfectly sane person behave like this if they're not under the influence of drugs or something? I don't really think that they do. But even if it is mental health, still, that's a reason why people should be careful what they say. So whatever you're going to say about a topic, particularly a sensitive topic like immigration or Islam or whatever, everything that's said should be said bearing in mind that there are unstable people who might act in an extreme way on the basis of it. That's not to say you can't address things and talk about issues, but just bear in mind the way that you do it. Now, is it terrorism? To be honest, I'm not sure I class it as terrorism, since it was such a poor attempt, not really very intelligently thought through. Difficult to say. The other thing people are saying is, normally politicians, anything like this, we can't comment on a live case. That would interfere with the police inquiry, interfere with the legal process. Whereas in this one, we've got people condemning anti-Muslim hatred, etc., etc. In other words, coming to a conclusion about the case. Now, is it double standards? Yes, that's not to say every situation is exactly the same. There might be valid differences in some cases, but I think there is a double standard acting there as well. But I think what this story does show, what this event does show, is that everyone needs to stop and think about what you're saying. Is it stirring up hatred? Is it dehumanizing a certain type of person, certain group within society? And if you feed people with just a string of bad news stories about a group in society, dehumanizing them, stoking anger, then in some cases that's going to result in crimes. It's going to result in violence, and everyone needs to bear that in mind. So talk about the issues, but do so in a responsible and balanced way. Right, in a balanced way, in contrast to people who talk about these issues in a totally unbalanced way from the other side. I've got a quote here from Humza Yousaf. John Swinney would be exactly the same, because this issue is so polarised. You've got some people who can only see one side of the argument and some people who can only see the other, and they just refuse to even accept the slightest validity in any other perspective. So I could have picked John Swinney. I happen to have picked Humza Yousaf here. Now, Humza Yousaf could have said, I share people's concerns about the grooming gangs. It's really appalling what's happened, but going around attacking random Muslims is obviously unjustified, and we've got to fight that. We've got to tackle that. And we've got to sympathise with Muslims and try and protect Muslims from this sort of attacks. Now, Humza Yousaf could have said something like that, just acknowledging that, okay, the record of involvement of Muslims in the grooming gangs is very, very concerning, and people are angry about it. Okay, he could have just acknowledged that, couldn't he? But not a bit of it. Never. He would not say something like this in this circumstance. Having said that, I do remember, it's a few years ago now, I remember Humza Yousaf putting something on social media. I can't find it now, but he did put something on social media where he talked about the grooming gangs, and he said that it showed something like some serious issues in our community. And I was quite staggered that he put that. That he actually seemed to be acknowledging this was within that Muslim Pakistani community. So, I mean, well done Humza Yousaf for that sort of one-off breakthrough of balance and being reasonable, but that was the exception. So let's see what he's had to say here. The sickening anti-Muslim attacks in Edinburgh have not appeared in a vacuum. Islamophobia has been mainstreamed for years, with the likes of Rupert Lowe, Tommy Robinson, sections of the media choose to deliberately put a target on the backs of Muslims. Don't be surprised when someone acts on their hateful rhetoric. Muslims don't simply want statements of solidarity, they need action. They want to see a plan from the office of the Prime Minister telling us he will protect Muslims in the UK who feel more and more unsafe in the country they call home. Time to stop pandering to the peddlers of hate. It's time to take them on. Now, if Muslims have got a target on their back, which they absolutely should not do, but the fact that they have, that's more to do with the behaviour and actions of some Muslims. It's more the responsibility of some Muslims than it is the likes of Rupert Lowe and Tommy Robinson. But Humza Yousaf would never acknowledge that. Right, what I want to show you now is some of the replies to this on social media, though. And think about this from Humza Yousaf's perspective. In a sense, it's no wonder he's so hard in his views, considering what he sees on social media of the other side coming back at him. Because a lot of people's responses to Humza Yousaf are totally out of order. And again, the theme of this video is, are we heading towards violence, paramilitary style violence in Scotland on this issue? Well, look at some of these responses. Now, I've selected these ones. This is a selection, but there was a lot more. And a very substantial proportion of the comments on social media were of this nature, were totally out of order. So, let's see. So the first one we got here: when Muslims rape, attack and kill people, the media always seems to forget to mention who committed the crime. Okay, there's some truth in that, it's not entirely true. But when a white man's had enough, they can't wait to tell the world the race. Okay, there's some truth in that. When a white man has had enough. So Muslims rape, attack and kill. When a white man tries to attack and kill people, well, he's just had enough. And the meme there, the day is coming when good men are going to have to do bad things, links in with what I was saying at the beginning. You hear this a lot on the internet. We're going to have to do bad things. So in other words, if someone says to you, what you've done is wrong, you've already got an answer. Doesn't matter. We need to do things that are wrong. So if someone said, what you did was really cruel and unfair, they'll be able to respond, well, I know, but in this particular circumstances, we're allowed to do that. And that's very concerning. Right, next one. Megan Basham, who's an American Christian commentator who I sort of thought was quite reasonable, what I've heard from her before. She says, I want the name of the man, the name of the victims who sustained injuries, details of those injuries, and other pertinent information before I'm prepared to believe this isn't a panicked false flag operation. I mean, that's just, I don't know. I struggle to find words that are not really offensive to describe that. But that's like the sort of conspiracy maniac response. Anyway, moving on. Molly Davies, who saves his country violates no law. In other words, this man who went around trying to stab Muslims, he was trying to save his country, so actually that shouldn't be illegal or can't be illegal. He should be let off for that. Really. Next one. Enough is enough, and finally one patriot snapped. In other words, we're on his side. He's the one that the action that we probably all should be taking. Freedom, that's a sign of Scottish solidarity and national pride. So that's good that the man did this. Next one. One man with the courage to do what's right, and he will be immediately abandoned by his countrymen. So totally supportive for the man going around trying to stab people. Damn, it's getting really dangerous for Muslims and minority Browns in the UK. They should go back to their own countries for safety. Now, that's worded in a jokey way, but I think a lot of people actually think that. If we can make life miserable enough for Muslims or ethnic minorities or whatever, then they will leave. And so that's what he's suggesting people ought to do to make them feel so unsafe. There's no political solution, so forget about voting for a party or any of that sort of business. There needs to be other types of action. What other types of action are there? Well, violence, for example. Another one, civil war. White man decides to even the score. How many tit-for-tat stabbings would it take to even the score anyway? In other words, what Muslims have done is so bad that, okay, if a white man goes and kills a few, then surely that's justified. Surely that's fine. Right, next one. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, here am I, send me. Again, a sort of religious, well, unfortunate Christian theme there. The idea, though, is that God's going to call people to attack Muslims in Britain. And so the man in Edinburgh going around trying to stab people, he's someone who'd answered the call of the Lord, according to this person here. Another one, not all heroes wear capes. So this man going around stabbing people was a hero. Someone else said they can't stop laughing about it. The other one, it's poetic justice. I don't think he understands what poetic justice is, but anyway. This one, you can see from the picture there. So the idea of this is we fought against the Nazis, which we shouldn't have really done because they're our brothers. We fought against the Nazis, but then look what's happened now. We've got all these black people here. Whoa. I mean, that really is Nazi ideology floating around on X in Scotland. The next one, I'm the infidel Allah warned you about. Again, paramilitary violence theme. Next one, we're just getting started. So, man goes around trying to stab Muslims in Edinburgh, and someone's saying, right, we're going to do a lot more of this. Next one, it's almost as if people are starting to get fed up of having a certain faith rammed down their throats, fed up of goat tamperers eyeing up their kids in play parks and fly tipping everywhere. Just the start. Okay, I mean, gross generalizations there, but again, just the start. There's going to be more of this. Then we get someone who sounds like a Muslim name comes on. Are not Nigel Farage, Tommy Robinson and Zia Yousaf responsible for this? Should they not be prosecuted for instigating this? You see what I mean about polarization? Now that's a totally bonkers view from totally the opposite side of the spectrum. So Nigel Farage should be prosecuted. I think Nigel Farage, I don't always think he's balanced. I don't think his tone is always right when he's talking about immigration. And Zia Yousaf as well, I tend to say generally is quite moderate in his tone. Tommy Robinson less so. But the idea they should be prosecuted for it, I mean, it's just a bit mad. Right, we'll go back to Ian from Argyll in Scotland. He's talking about the attacker. When does he get a medal and a parade? Then we get another man who says basically 5 people injured isn't enough. Now, those sort of comments are a very substantial portion of the comments you'll see on social media. So they're representing thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of people in Scotland. Now, let's say only 1% of those people actually acts on this sort of thinking, acts on this incitement to violence. 1% of those numbers is quite a lot. So is Scotland heading for paramilitary violence? I think very possibly. What I mean by paramilitary, I don't mean necessarily firearms, although that's quite possible. I mean organised, targeted violence, organised by a group and repeated. Now, I'm just going to go for a little bit of a tangent here. So look at Anna Sarwar's Facebook page, where he put on a picture of himself in a Scotland top saying, I'm watching the game tonight, recently. And read some of the responses to this. So, are you Scottish or Pakistani? Answer that question. Will have his England top on Wednesday. Should be wearing an England top, surely. As Scottish as a poppadom. Pakistani, I believe he's not Scottish. Or Pakistan not playing. So that's someone born in Scotland, raised in Scotland, no intention as far as I'm aware to ever live anywhere else, and he puts on, he's going to support the national team in the World Cup, and this is what he gets. So there's some people saying, hey, you're not Scottish, how can you be supporting Scotland? And I think that's like Restore Britain type thinking coming through. You're not really Scottish, you're not really a proper Scottish person. If you haven't got Scottish DNA, then your passport and whatever, that doesn't make you Scottish. You're not really Scottish. So what are you doing supporting Scotland? Then you get Scottish nationalists saying, if you're not a Scottish nationalist, then how can you support the Scotland team? You should be supporting England. And so imagine you're Anna Sarwar and you put something on social media saying, looking forward to the game, supporting Scotland tonight, which I believe absolutely sincerely that he is, and you get this coming back. I mean, it's quite hard to be balanced. It's quite hard to acknowledge that people on the other side of this debate might have some sensible things to say when you're subjected to this sort of rubbish constantly on social media. So it's so polarized. And I guess part of trying to understand other people's point of view is understanding what they're on the receiving end of that might lead to their unwillingness to countenance the existence of reasonable, good people who have opinions on the other side of the argument, shall we say. So on this whole issue, it is a nightmare to speak out on because there's such polarization. Whatever you say, there's people on either side ready to jump in with just stock lines to throw at you. I mean, if you look at the comments of this video, that's probably what will be happening as we speak. And it's very difficult. But I guess my fundamental point here is there are two truths with regard to immigration. There are two things that are true. And very few people properly acknowledge both of them. But it's vital to acknowledge both of them. Right, number one, there are significant problems associated with immigration in Britain and in Scotland. Okay, one of the problems is crime of different types. There's grooming gangs, there's other types of crime as well that have been exacerbated by immigration. Okay, I think asylum seekers in particular are likely to be engaged in criminal activity just because of their circumstance, if nothing else. I think immigration's brought problems in terms of cultural differences, division in communities. There's a huge cost often associated, which leads to resentment among the existing population. I think with Islam in particular, there are very valid concerns about terrorism, I say particular types of crime, extreme views, etc., etc. All very valid concerns that need to be addressed directly. It's also true that the response to the UK state and sort of left-wing centrist parties has generally been to ignore the concerns, to crush the concerns, to demonize people expressing these concerns and to mistreat them. I say, well, two-tier policing, etc. It's not just policing, it's virtually every aspect of the state. It is all absolutely true. So someone like John Swinney or Hamza Yousaf, whatever, they will not acknowledge any of these points. They will not acknowledge them. They will just try to pretend that anyone who says these things is a bad person. So we don't need to respond to the actual concerns. We can just say there's a bad person, must be racist or whatever. We can ignore that. But those concerns about immigration are real and they are justified. That's not to say that lots of immigrants are great or whatever, but those concerns are real. That's thing number one, right? Okay, fact number two, in my view, is indisputably true. And that is that there's a nasty side to human nature. That means that some people relish the opportunity to turn on another group, to enter into an us and them dynamic and to become hateful and violent towards the other group. It's the tribal mentality. And in the tribal mentality, morality goes out of the window. What's right and wrong doesn't really count. It's who's on my side, who's on their side. So people in that mindset, they find it very difficult to say that person may be sort of on my side, but what he did was out of order. That was just wrong. Right and wrong, not so interested. My side, their side, that becomes the dominant thing. So any crime that's committed, the first consideration isn't, oh, that was a terrible thing, sympathy for the victims, etc. The first thing such people would think, right, who did it? I hope it was one of their side who did a bad thing, then we can make capital out of it. Now, I think these people, these are not sort of nice people who've been pushed over the edge by frustrations. Often these are hooligans finding a new outlet. Okay, if they weren't, attacking a mosque or something, they're probably trying to be beating up some opposing football fans. Okay, and same on the other side as well, on the sort of extreme left wing as well. Some of the left wing fans, they're not nice people who just happen to be particularly animated by climate change or anti-racism or whatever. They're violent people finding an outlet. I mean, a few weeks ago I was in Glasgow when there was an anti-immigration protest going on. I was there coincidentally, but the ethos of it was pretty ugly. Really hard people looking extremely aggressive, very, very unpleasant. Now, such people are into that sort of tribal mentality, relishing the opportunity to turn on a group. Whatever you say about immigration, they'll just say, you're not angry enough, you're not being insulting enough, and that's what they want. So when a crime's committed by someone in a sort of anti-immigration type theme, they might get cursory condemnation at best, but as I've shown, often not even that. Because people of this mindset like to dehumanize the other group. So no sympathy for them, no attempt to understand them. They just want to fight. We need to defeat these people, not we need to persuade them, change them, achieve harmony one way or another. And the other thing that drives this side is generalization. Like, immigrants do this, Muslims do this, Muslims think this. Now, often these generalizations, they're either sort of unintelligent, people don't realize that you can't draw a conclusion about a huge group of people from limited information, or sometimes it's deliberate. They know that they're not being fair to all Muslims or all immigrants, but they do it in any case. Now, immigration is obviously particularly sensitive because it deals with groups of people. And if there's no attempt to understand the other side or to moderate, then it's going to lead to conflict between groups of people. Now, into that dynamic recently, we've had Restore Britain coming with Rupert Lowe. And I'll say he is someone who makes no effort whatsoever to balance. He's happy to stoke hostility, cross boundaries, and just wind people up more and more and more. And again, it's not to say you shouldn't raise issues, but you should do it in a way that's demonstrating balance. A couple of things that he suggested, Rupert Lowe. I mean, he suggested retrospective death penalty. I've only heard him do that with regard to immigrants, by the way. So an immigrant will commit a crime, will be in prison, and Rupert Lowe has said, if we were in power, or if we were the government, what we would do is we would kill that person. Right, that contravenes a very fundamental element of the law. You can only punish someone under law according to the law and sentencing whatever that is in place when the crime was committed. You can't go back. A government can't say, oh, we've decided now there's the death penalty for whatever. And so we're going to go through the books, go through the files. Anyone who committed that crime in the past, we're going to kill them. You can't do that. If you introduce the death penalty, you can apply it in the future, but you can't apply it retrospectively. That's a pretty fundamental issue. But any politician that says they're going to do that, basically they're saying they're going to be sort of a dictator. They're going to throw away like legal and constitutional restraint and just going to do what they please to extract revenge. Similar, I mean, Rupert Lowe said Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman, they should be put in prison. They should be prosecuted under a Restore government. Again, for what crime? It's one thing to disagree with someone, but to try and extract vengeance on political opponents who are frankly not that different in opinion from Rupert Lowe, I think it's totally beyond the pale. And people should have the sense, should have the judgment to hear that and think, whoa, there's something wrong here. This is someone who's willing to cross lines that shouldn't be crossed, to become an authoritarian dictator, ignoring the rule of law. But if you're trying to appeal to tribal hostility, the more extreme you can be, the more you will appeal. So what we need in this debate is people who can see both truths. And that seems to be really rare. If you're a left-wing politician, whose votes do you want? Actually, you want the votes of immigrants. There's an awful lot of them, and you want them to vote for you. And so you want to be hyper-positive about immigration. Anyone who's expressing concerns about immigration, let's just dismiss that. We want to be the party of the immigrants to vote for. So we're just going to be on that side. And then on the right wing, or further right, then you'll find ones who want to capitalise on people who've got concerns about immigration. Okay, valid political issue, fine. But then there's also the tribal hostility vote, which, as I've shown from social media, is not insignificant. There are a very substantial number of people who just have like hatred and hostility towards immigrants or Muslims or whatever, and that's a substantial slice of the vote. So if you're after that slice of the vote, again, it's not in your interest to try and be balanced and see both sides of the argument. So it's a dangerous situation. Needless to say, the Scottish Family Party brings the perfect balance into this discussion. So Scottish Family Party, illegal immigration, it's a crime. People engage in it for selfish reasons, to earn more or to just get a beachhead and get the rest of the family over. They pass through other safe countries. They multiply their salary by 5 or 10 times. That's the real motivation. So how should illegal immigration be dealt with? Detain and deport, make it so the crime doesn't pay. I mean, almost all asylum seekers, they dispose of their documents so they can effectively come here and lie about where they really came from. And if you allow these people to stay here in hotels or whatever, problems are going to be inevitable and it needs dealing with. One thing I'm going to say about this, I don't like the description military-aged young men, because it conjures an impression of them being a military, being a fighting force, which often they're, generally they're not. But illegal immigration, drastic action needed, we'd do it. Right, legal immigration, reduce it drastically based on data. Not all immigrants are equal. Some immigrants will come from a similar culture with good English language already, with skills that will lead to them contributing to the economy. Other immigrants who might be importing problems. I mean, Q Manavanan has been talking about the problems of the caste system in Scotland. Well, that's an imported problem. Honour killings, Hindu-Muslim tensions. In some cases, drug issues have come with immigrants, certain types of crime. Integrity and corruption. Some immigrants come from societies where it's quite normal to bribe and you don't follow the rules and they don't really get enforced. So that culture comes to Britain, comes to Scotland. Now, we've got plenty of problems on our own. We've got plenty of faults and flaws, absolutely, but we don't need to be importing more. So immigration should be controlled on an intelligent basis, on the basis of data. How is this likely to work out with this particular person? Some people here should be deported. Maybe if they haven't got citizenship yet and there are reasons for them to be deported, then, okay, maybe that's what needs to happen. But our aim within the UK, within Scotland, is going to be united society. There is such a thing as stirring up hatred. And if you feed people just a constant stream of bad news stories about immigrants, that's what you will do. But we want to aim for a united society. So while tackling the real issues, also trying to bring people together and emphasize common ground. Now, when it comes to Islam, whenever I say anything about Islam, people normally reply, I don't know about Islam. I've looked into Islam a lot. I've read a lot about it, debated it, etc. So I know what's in the Quran. I know about Muhammad's life and his example. I know that some Muslims have a supremacist attitude. I know about the grooming gangs. I know about Islamic extremism. I know about terrorism. I know about the Islamic teaching about warfare. And people saying as well, Muslims, they're loyal to Islam, not to their nation. I never hear that. I always think, well, I'm loyal to God before my nation as well. So I'm not sure that's particularly a problem. And the demographic issue, very significant. Birth rates among Muslims tend to be significantly higher, and birth rates among particularly white British, white Scottish people tend to be low. I know about all that. I know about it. But Muslims are quite a diverse group of people. I found myself recently saying to a few people, just out of curiosity, say to them, tell me one thing about Christians in Scotland. Tell me one thing. And it's actually really difficult. So if you say to me, tell you one thing about Christians in Scotland, well, they call themselves Christians, people who identify themselves as Christians. They call themselves Christians, and they believe that Jesus is the Son of God. A lot of people who call themselves Christians don't believe that. They try and follow Jesus' teaching. A lot of Christians don't do that. They go to church. No, not all of them. They believe any sort of moral value is common across people who call themselves Christians. No. So basically, when it comes to Christians in Scotland, there's virtually nothing I can say that applies to them, to all of them as a group. Okay. Or you could say, Christians are Scottish or white or whatever. There's nothing you can say. They're really varied. It's the same with Muslims. So I often hear people say, Muslims believe, Muslims think that, Muslims want to. And any statement like that is almost always wrong, because there's a big spectrum of opinions among Muslims. Now, I'm not saying that therefore Muslims and Christians are the same. Therefore, all these concerns about Islam don't apply. They do apply, but they don't apply to every Muslim in the same way. There's a big spectrum there. Now, I think in Britain, in Scotland and Britain in particular, I think the tolerance towards Islam, it's almost miraculous. It's almost miraculous. If you look back at cases in history, look at the 1920s, the Ku Klux Klan in America were very anti-Catholic, and all sorts of nutcase conspiracy theories floated around there. The Catholics were storing up guns in their churches, ready for the word from the Pope to stage a revolution or something. I mean, it's absolute nutcase conspiracy nonsense. But still, there was this pretty virulent anti-Catholic sentiment. If you look at anti-Semitism, like in medieval England, then they accused the Jews of doing all sorts of things, like abducting their children, and all sorts of, plotting the downfall of the government, all sorts of things, plotting a takeover. I mean, really, really, in all cases, basically, ridiculous. They're totally untrue. But that fueled anti-Semitism to a remarkable degree, extreme violence towards Jews in England. Then if you look at Islam now, the raw material that people have got to stoke up hostility towards Muslims, well, to be honest, unfortunately, there's a lot of it. There are a lot of actually true things, terrorism, grooming gangs, etc., 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 which do give people cause to be concerned about Islam. So the miraculous tolerance of Islam, I think, is a good thing. I'm not complaining about it. I think it's a good thing. But I think we need to be balanced and aware that people do have good reasons to be concerned about Islam. But can Muslims integrate into Western society, into the UK, into Scotland? I think the answer is yes. Not if they hold some particularly fundamentalist views about Islam, then maybe not. But in many cases, yes. And it makes it less likely that's going to happen if people are being inflammatory. So if people are saying, oh, Muslims think this, Muslims think that, and then moderate Muslims, maybe even nominal Muslims, they call themselves Muslims, but, they don't really take it particularly seriously or believe much of it, then those sort of people will be inflamed and they're more likely to become more extreme. So the idea that, you can ban mosques or even attack mosques, and this is somehow going to solve the problem with Islam, well, it's not. It's just going to make it worse. It's just going to radicalize Muslims. It's going to, in general, move Muslims along the spectrum towards the more extreme and concerning end. So in terms of Islam, what are the valid responses? Well, I've said you can control immigration. I think the fertility rate is really important. So the reason Britain's needed mass immigration is because the native population hasn't had enough babies and continues to have fewer and fewer babies. And basically that needs to change. People talk about, the great replacement. It's not that there's a plot to replace the white population in Britain. It's more that the indigenous white population has decided not to reproduce itself, and therefore its only way of sustaining the economy is through mass immigration. So an increase in fertility rate is necessary. And again, if someone's concerned about immigration, another option within an open democracy is to persuade people to change their faith or to change their interpretation of their faith. So that could be, say, for a Christian, presenting Christianity as an alternative, or more broadly, just presenting a critique of Islam. And then maybe a lot of Muslims say, you know what, actually, I'm not sure I actually believe this, or I don't believe these elements of it that I did. And the key thing for that is the opportunity for open discussion, which often is not present at the moment. I've said recently, I think if a public figure, or anyone really, if they say, I'm a Muslim, the natural next stage of the conversation should be, okay, so you believe Muhammad's a prophet, do you? You believe the Quran is a revelation from God. What do you think about this part of the Quran? When Muhammad did this, What do you think about that? That should be a perfectly normal conversation. So your Hamza Yousaf, Anas Sarwar, Zia Yousaf, etc., they should be asked these questions. And would it not be interesting and helpful to hear their answers to them? And I think the same for a Christian. If anyone says they're a Christian and they're a public figure, fair enough. Someone say to them, okay, you say you're a Christian, what do you believe? Do you believe what's in the Bible? Do you believe Jesus was the Son of God? Do you believe these Old Testament laws still apply? These conversations need to happen out in the open. I think that will be healthier for everyone. My concern in Scotland is we've got a growing band of hotheads, and we're heading towards anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim violence of an organised nature. And there's a significant number of people for whom it's in their interest to be stoking this up, because it gets their votes, because it gets their views, or whatever. So then there's a dangerous dynamic developing in Scotland. And this will be very bad, obviously, for two reasons. One reason is innocent people are going to be the victims of crimes. And that is a terrible thing, and everybody should oppose that. And the other thing is, it's going to be extremely counterproductive for the people who want to express concerns about immigration, because concerns about immigration will be countered by the idea that, oh, you're just part of this movement of racist thugs. And that's what's happened in the past with regard to immigration, is we try to have a sensible argument, but then anti-immigration extremists enable the other side to cast them, as I say, as racist thugs, as bad people. So it will produce injustices in terms of victims of crime, and it will also tend to shut down debate about concerns about immigration. So potentially doubly disastrous. But unfortunately, I see it coming. Okay, what do you think? Do comment below. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.